Hi and welcome to the Draw for FX indicator overview. I'm Brooky, and as the developer of Draw for FX, I'll be your guide as we take a look at how to operate the Draw for FX indicator for MT4 and how to get the most out of it to enhance your charting markups. In this video you're going to learn how to set up the Draw for FX correctly in MT4 and understand how it complements and enhances existing drawing tools. The indicator works somewhat differently than standard indicators as it hooks into the newer MT4 version capabilities that are used in MT5 but rarely utilised in MT4. We will cover how you can make the most of these and effectively use them in your chart drawings. We will also learn the benefits of both the freehand and locked chart modes and when to use either for best effect. We will also look at examples of markup so you can see how easy it is to access and use these tools and a whole lot more. By the time the video is over, you'll understand and be able to install and begin using the Draw for FX indicator for MT4. We've got a lot to cover. In this Draw for FX segment, we'll discuss the initial installation and setup of the indicator. The Draw for FX indicator is a standard MT4 indicator type that belongs in the MQL4 indicators folder of your MT4 installation. Easiest way to install it is to first copy the Brooky Draw for FX ex4 file that you would have received. Open your platform and then go to File, Open Data Folder, MQL4 Indicators, and paste that file in that area. Once you restart your platform, it will be available in the standard indicators or the custom indicators area in the Brooky Draw for FX file. Drag that onto your chart and you'll be seeing the About screen. Two things to note here in particular. It mentions the live ticks need to be available for the graphics to display. MT4 requires live ticks to display these objects. If you're using the indicator on the weekend, as I do, you may want to use a weekend tick program that sends ticks to your MT4 platform. That's handy and it makes planning for next week's trades much easier with any graphical indicator. There's another note here which mentions that the indicator needs to be the first on the chart and your other indicators underneath it. That is if you want to use the maximum or the expanded version of the indicator with all the options. We'll discuss exactly what that means very shortly. In the Common tab, you can leave the DLL imports and so forth as per your system settings, but make sure that the minimum and the maximum areas are not selected as the program deals with them internally. In the inputs area, there's one concession for people who use screens of, say, less than standard size or of a very high resolution. We allow you to select either 1, 2 or 3, which is small, medium or large version of the indicator, which will scale it slightly smaller and slightly larger to just fit into your screen and be visually easier for you to read. The default is 2, which should suit most people. Prompts on, that's a bit of a beginner's mode. If it's true, then there's a few extra prompts that occur on certain button pressings. Draw points for alert, that is set quite high, but if you're busy drawing a Mona Lisa on the screen, there is a point at which there's just so many objects it starts to get a little bit silly, and you get a warning here to make sure that the system can cope with the quantity of objects that you're putting on the screen. Colours are mainly for the toolbar, but in all honesty you need not go in here 99.9% of the time, and defaults should be fine for most people. In the colours, that is irrelevant for this particular indicator. You can change it to whatever your colour want, makes no difference whatsoever. Levels, don't draw levels on the indicator, it'll just put lines on the buttons and that's not going to help anybody. Now with visualization, normally you would have it on all time frames. However, there's a point to be made that if you deselect that and say you prefer to plan or you like scoping on say H4, is to only make the indicator appear on a H4 chart. That way you can do your planning, get just your thought processes and so forth can all occur on H4, and when you go down to your smaller time frames for trading, there's an extra indicator there that isn't cluttering up the screen. Just something to bear in mind there. Once you understand that area there, just click OK, and the first time you see the indicator, it'll just pop itself on chart like so. When that happens, just press the minimize button for a moment to initialize that min-max set of variables that the indicator will draw on. If it is the only indicator on chart, you then have the maximum button available. This opens up all the options for you, which we'll discuss in the next segment. And if you press minimize, that just reduces it all so that it leaves the chart nice and clear and tucks the toolbar out of the way. In the actual toolbar are a set of quick set values for symbols, colours and sizes, which would suit most drawing needs most of the time. We'll go through the actions of each of these buttons in that next segment. Now, to illustrate what is meant by first indicator on top and the action that may or may not take place then, we'll just add an RSI indicator. Which will just pop itself up on screen where it feels like. Just change it to whatever size that you're comfortable with there. When it's in this mode here, you'll find that the toolbar sits at a fairly small size, just above that indicator, and really doesn't get in the way of trading in any sense. But by doing it this way, you still have the maximum maximization available, and all the options are available all of the time. And then the sub-indicator will scale as needs be when you minimize. Now, just to illustrate what happens if it's the other way around, if we delete the RSI there, right, so let's say you've set it up this way here, where you already have the RSI available on chart, and then you choose to add the draw for FX indicator, you'll see that it now sits under that RSI. MT4 struggles to push all of that to the top when we maximize the value. You will find that the indicator will hide half of its maximum functions and so forth because MT4 simply can't work that out. So in this instance here, we just set up an alert there that lets you know that in that mode you only have the quick set minimum variables available to you, which, as mentioned before, will suit you most of the time. And in all honesty, for trading, I find that I use it in this mode often because it simply suits a lot of the things that I need to do for planning, but that's your own choice. With the indicator itself, there's no need to do the standard right click, remove and so forth on the actual toolbar. If you don't want it on chart, it's as simple as let's click remove. Now, the next segment will cover all those buttons that were there and what they do, what their functions are, and how to best utilize them. In this session, we'll discuss how the toolbar, the draw toolbar itself, operates and what some of the buttons mean and the terminology of the drawbar system. Just to start, what I'll do is first pop a big fat blue arrow on chart so you can follow along a little bit easier. The remove button itself takes over the concept of right click delete indicator that is standard on MT4. It will also clear any of the objects that have been placed on the chart itself during your draw session. Just to illustrate, once we remove, you'll notice it takes the arrow away, it leaves any other objects from the standard MT4 draw system on the chart. I'll just pop the indicator back on again. Give ourselves back our arrow and continue. What you would have seen me do when I was using that arrow was to use what is called the start button. The start button starts a draw session, turns to finish, and when you deselect, goes back to start. It's really just an on and off system for the draw. What that does is that under normal circumstances, your mouse will control the chart, any scaling and so forth. We need to stop that happening so that you can actually draw on the chart without moving it. It also starts up a few functions that we'll require for the rest of the system to work. This start, draw, finish process is something that you have to get used to. The C or the C denotes that the actual objects are locked to chart, price and time. If you keep your eye on that arrow, if we move the chart in any direction, scale and different time frames and so forth, the actual arrow stays in place, time and price. That's the mode that is default that you would probably use most of the time. The F mode is freehand mode. Just to illustrate that, I'll place an object on chart. I'll just change its color. Let's put a red dot there. You'll notice that I finished that drawing session. That means that now the mouse takes over the chart again. When we moved the chart, the blue arrow stayed in place. In freehand mode, you'll notice that that actually is not the case at all. It stays in place relative to the screen. That allows much finer draw control, and it's perfect for if you just want to sketch a concept on the chart, take a picture of it, send it to your friend traders, or put it on Facebook, archive it as a system and so forth. It's very granular in how it draws, and you can get very, very detailed with it. If you are trading with what you are drawing, i.e. you're drawing levels, dots, arrows, labels and so forth, then I suggest that you use the lock to chart and time. Minimize and maximize you already are aware of. We're in minimize mode at the moment. Maximize simply gives you all of the options available, which we'll discuss in a second. For the moment, we'll use the clear all system, but there are a full set of buttons there which are to do with undo, which I'll cover a little bit in detail once I go through the simpler buttons, and that is simply to look after all the objects that are placed on chart by the draw system. We'll just head over now to the photo area. Quite simply, the inbuilt photo taking mechanism of MT4 is far superior to anything that the code can handle, and pressing that will simply give you an alert that you should actually just duck up to the file, save as picture, use the active chart as is. It allows you to save it wherever you wish to save it, and gives you a nice picture of exactly what's on chart, pixel perfect. That's just a reminder that that is where you should be taking your photos from. The next set of buttons is a quick set of the most common colors that you may wish to use. As you select those particular colors, you'll notice that the symbols themselves that are selectable will change color to what it is that you will be placing on chart. It's a quick visual cue to what color you are always on. The next three buttons are small, medium and large. That's quite simply whatever you're drawing is small, it's medium and it's large. It's that simple: small arrow, medium arrow, large arrow. Just to illustrate there, if we start the draw system, we've got an orange color there, and we want to put a small orange arrow somewhere, then we can just pop it here and it's a tiny little thing. If we then select the medium size mode, you can see we're a little bit bigger, and if we really want to get the point across, three sizes that are most useful for most occasions. I didn't see, as you can see, I didn't stop my draw session there. Okay, so I have some extra arrows. I'll actually turn my undo system on at this point, and you can see that it's just counting how many objects I've actually got on chart at any point in time. And if I press the undo buttons now, you'll see that as the ticks come through, that these arrows which I've placed on chart are disappearing. That's one way to use the undo system. Now, so it does rely on ticks coming through. but it is one way that you can just undo a few of the last items without undoing the entire draw session. Okay, so system is off. I'll leave that undo system on. I'll explain that in detail a little bit more later. With these symbols here, you have your standard draw symbol, which is a dot, and then a few normal symbols that you could quite conceivably use often within your trading. I skip past these two buttons here because they're quite unique. You'll notice that they're greyed out, they're a slightly different colour, and that is because whether or not the system is on or off, they're available to you. The text one, very simply, places a text object near your close price there, but it places it in the size and the colour that you've selected. So without going through the normal things that you have to with MT4, you've got an object there that you can very quickly right click and write whatever note it is that you wish to write at that particular point in time. You can then move it wherever you want. The same applies, and this is one I use a lot. I'll change this one to blue because it's a little bit easier to see that way, is a trend line. Okay, this way it just pops a trend line in the close area there, and you can just drag it and draw it where you want in a colour that is appropriate for whatever that you're doing. That's a very, very handy little addition. In the undo system here, you notice we've got undo on and off. We tend to suggest that if you are dealing in a locked chart mode and you only have a few objects in place, a few arrows, a few lines, and a bit of explanation, that it's quite appropriate to turn the undo system on. You can undo the last one as you saw beforehand, or you can undo a group of 10 at a time. Now that's showing that you can undo a group of 10 and that there are 7 objects on the chart at this particular point in time. If I deselect the last one that I put on the chart, you'll see that that trend line that we had there before disappears. It just helps you keep track of a few little mistakes that you may make as you move along with your drawing. When you're in freehand mode, and I'll put it in freehand mode just to illustrate and start the actual draw system. When you're in freehand mode, you can rack up the amount of objects on chart very quickly. At the moment we're reading 6. If we go into freehand mode like so, you'll notice that the system's reading how many objects we've got. It takes time to read the amount of objects because of the way that MT4 works, and that's why when you do a lot of drawing, you'll actually find that it is quite possible that the system is struggling to keep up with how many objects you're drawing. And if you do some deletions, that you may find that you're not deleting the last one, but back somewhere in this line here, because the system simply hasn't caught up. So that's why we suggest to either give it a little bit of time to catch up with the undos if you're doing freehand mode, or not worry about it at all and plan to sort of do a freehand drawing and then just clear all. If we wanted to reduce this line, we drew it too much or too far, we can undo 10 at a time. You can see that the line is reducing by lots of 10 objects at a time. So use the undo system wisely. It's very, very handy. A little bit of practice makes perfect, and you'll get used to how that works. Okay. So bearing all that in mind, we might just lose our objects there. You'll notice that's gone back to 0. I'll start up and I'll go into lock to chart mode, and we'll give ourselves blue again, and we'll give ourselves an object. Now, can I say, sometimes the colour on the object is a little bit hard to see. What I find is that if I press the white, then I can very easily see the object. Then I press the colour, and it's just a little bit easier to deal with that way. We will go back to, and I've finished that drawing session because, sorry, I didn't draw it, did I? I've finished that drawing session now, so I've got that arrow on chart. If we go to the maximise view now, what this is really doing is expanding on all of what the quick links do on top, which is why the quick link bar is in most cases suitable for everyday drawing. However, if you did want to expand or draw different symbols, what you can do is start the system, and let's say for example that we wanted to put another symbol on chart like so. We just select that particular symbol. Now that symbol will be in the color that we've selected and in the size that we've selected, and we can pop that on chart like so. If you were doing like a 1, 2, 3 step approach, or trying to draw an ABC pattern or something like that there, you might select a number, whatever color that you want at that point in time, and pop that on chart. That gives you the range of all of the symbols instead of trying to work out what does number 211 look like and so forth, which is the standard MT4 way of doing things. What you'll also find is that the pen size itself, while we have the small, medium and large, if there was a particular reason that you wanted a particularly large symbol, just change the size there, just press the save to make sure that it is picking up that size. You can pick whatever other object that you want. We might do this one in orange. If you put that on chart, you'll see that it now is an absolutely huge size. Handy for different things that you may be placing on chart. Now I'll just minimize this for a moment. You would have noticed that with this text here, right, now that's still carrying that large size that we did in the manual set there, but that appears at this particular point here around the close area, ready for you to edit. Okay, I'll select that. We'll just manually delete that particular one. I'll just reset the size here. In free mode, if you press this text option here, you notice the text is always available in this top left hand corner here. That is in deference to the one when you're in chart mode. Just something to be aware of when you're looking for where they appear. Reason for that is because that's not connected to the chart at all, and that's why we pop it up in the left hand corner there, which you can then move wherever you wish when you're in a freehand mode. Again, it's the same sort of object. It's just able to be edited straight on the screen like so. Okay. Now that you've got that idea, we'll go back to the chart lock mode. We'll go back to the maximize, and I'll just illustrate this area here, which is the text. Sometimes if you want to pop a few items on the chart at once and then move afterwards, you could actually press, you could actually type the text in here, and you'll notice the word cell comes up straight away in that area there, which you can then move around to where you want, to where you wish. You can just select another color, and you'll see that'll come up on screen. That's handy if you're doing some presentation sort of work and you've got an idea of what you want to say and you just want to get 3 or 4 labels on chart in a hurry, and then spend the time shifting those into place where you wish. So that is quite handy, and they're in chart lock mode, and you'll notice the difference compared to the one that was done in freehand mode up there. So there are different times that that's useful, and in our examples segment, which is next, I'll do some chart markups there, and you can see how all of these functions are useful in different ways at different times. So that covers pretty well how the actual button systems work. It just takes a little bit of practice, and you'll find that it becomes second nature to have this toolbar on chart available to do whatever markup that you wanted in. In this session, we'll just go through a few examples of how you might apply the toolbar to your trading. For the first instance, we'll just imagine that we're just scoping a little bit. We've seen some price on chart and want to get a bit of an idea of whether we're looking at a pattern or what we can make of what we're seeing. So we'll start the system. We'll go into freehand mode because we won't be worrying about turning the undo system on. We're just going to doodle on the chart for a little bit and see if we can come up with some concept of what we're seeing. So we start the system. We're in freehand mode. I'll just put a little label on chart here just to remind ourselves what mode we're on. So I've selected the text button, and it's come up in the top left hand corner as it does in freehand mode, and we'll just go freehand so we all understand there. You could have changed the size down there. You can actually change the size as per normal through here. So we'll just pop that up there to remind ourselves that we're in freehand mode. So we'll start the system. We'll grab that dot, and we've got the red colour because we can see the red in the actual symbols down below there. We'll pick a nice big fat size so that we can see what we're doing. And we'll have a look at, let's say we saw something developing in this end of about a week or so ago, and we might go, well, it's sort of looking a little bit like a rounded top, and maybe that spike there, and let's say we saw the pattern up through to here. We'd probably start to go, that's starting to look a bit head and shouldery, so we might just continue mucking around a little bit to visualize. And that's the whole point of the freehand system, is to get a bit of an idea, just let the mind wander on and use your experience with patterns and so forth to get a bit of an idea whether or not we've got something going on here that you might be looking forward to using as the base for a trading plan for the following week. So we've certainly got the humps and so forth there. It looks a lot like we've got some good support running through here. So we're looking like there might be a bit of a neckline running through there. That would mean, if we understand our patterns, that probably somewhere in this vicinity through here, that we would possibly be looking for some sort of break or something in that kind of an area there. If that's the case, then and that sort of a pattern kind of followed through, then you'd apply the concepts of normal profit taking and so forth, which is roughly the height of that neckline to that particular area there, which would mean that there would be probably a take profit area somewhere there in the future. Second take profit's often the height of that. They head down to what would be a trend line there. That looks like it probably somewhere around about there in that vicinity. So you'd look at that there and you go, well, that's possible. Yeah, I think that could be something that, if it's confirmed with the breaks and so forth, is something to look forward to for that following week. If that was the case, you might just want to take a little picture of that there. Now, remember, that was that reminder to go, and you do this 2 or 3 times, you'll just automatically go up here anyway. And then you give yourself a little, maybe that's one concept to think towards, and you've got yourself a picture there that you can refer to in the following week if you wish. So it's that sort of thing that freehand can be really useful for. It's just getting a few ideas on chart visually, because many of us are visual. I'm a great technical trader. I love my patterns, but for me, sometimes just seeing it like that there just kind of makes sense. So that's just one quick example of how freehand mode can be very, very helpful. In the freehand mode itself, you'll find, we'll just clear all of that. In the freehand mode itself, which we're still in, we'll just start that again, you'll find you can get quite detailed with how many objects, depending how slowly you move the mouse, in certain areas. If you're an analyst, or if you're presenting a system to students, or you just want to share with a friend and you take a little bit more time with the actual drawing itself, it's quite surprising how you can get detailed, make a point, make a particular label on something, and you can, with a little bit of practice, get some extraordinarily clear drawings available for whatever you're using them for. So just bear in mind that while you can make it a bit quick and chunky, that there's certainly the ability to get quite granular with it. So we'll just clear all of that, and what we'll do is we'll change, as you saw, I've changed from the freehand into the fixed chart system, and we'll just pop a little label now, and you'll notice that appeared at the close, or around that close area as discussed previously. And we'll just now call this fixed mode, and we'll just pop that up the top here so we remember what mode we're in. Now, in fixed mode, if we're looking at a pattern like that there, we've done the freehand and go, well, okay, now I actually want to get a little bit serious about this. What we can do, bearing in mind that you're thinking that there's a head and shoulders appearing here, is we'd probably want to delineate that particular area there a little bit clearer. So we can start to draw a trend line there. Then you'll find that if we just want to give ourselves a reminder that we're indeed thinking of buying or selling at any appropriate time, like what are we looking at, we go pick an arrow, for example, go, well, it was certainly, sorry, let's start the system there. You'll notice that when you put a text or a line object on the chart, the system automatically turns off for a moment so that it gives you the ability to select it and move and place it. Just turn the draw system back on again and you go, well, there's the three areas that are now what I was looking at, which is the head and shoulders pattern. If we then wanted to plan on where there may be an entry through here, whether you prefer to trade off the possibility a little higher up, what we can do is we can put this up through here. If you're an early entry taker, then you might be wanting to look for some sort of retest in this area through here, which is often an early entry for the head and shoulders. Many people trade the break through here, and if you want to let yourself know that that area is possibly available as your break area, you can just pop a little chart there to remind yourself that that was the break, so that's where your measurements and so forth are taken from. But you can see yourself now that you've got a clear trend line there. If you're looking at a specific measurement area through there that you can apply your measures to. Now what you would want to do then would be probably to sorry, just turn that system off there, we'll just deselect that. You might just want to measure now on where possible, assuming that you don't know all this exists yet, on where there might be some possible targets. Often the first target is whatever that particular width is there, so you're looking at about 74 pips through there. Which happens to be precisely there. Now you have come to this point here, you may have wanted at that point then to just place a measurement line somewhere in that area there to let you know that that could very well be a first TP area. The second TP is the measurement from the top straight down through there, so we're reading around about 100. Should we be lucky enough to get in a trade like that, we would have said that we'd be down at around about 100 odd mark through there. Okay, so what you could then do is say, okay, there's a second TP somewhere in that area through there, which is around about here, and then your third is the height from the neckline down through to the trend line that was underneath there. Now you're looking at what, about 161 there, which would measure down to somewhere in this vicinity down here. Now remember, at this point here you actually don't know any of all of this has happened through here, so you just basically able to get some levels there on chart that are some maybe levels should price get to that area, which you can confirm as price actually moves through. So what you can see, in fact, what did happen was precisely what we thought. But the benefit of the freehand mode was that we could see back through here that there was the possibility of that happening when we just scoped it out with a quick free, and then you can get more granular with the entire story as it develops with all your standard measuring tools and stuff like that there. Now something like this here, you can even start to make some notes for yourself that in fact is going to be your TP one area as an example, and just pop it somewhere around about there. And that way you've got a bit of a trading plan ahead of time, and what you're doing is you're working to a plan, and if the price confirms your thoughts, then you're not being reactionary, you're actually being proactive and saying, let price come to where I want it to come to confirm the thoughts that I've got. If it doesn't, that's cool. That just means that that particular pattern isn't what's working at that point in time, and you'd have a look for another pattern. But that's one way that you can use both the freehand mode and the fixed mode to get a concept of what the market may or may not be doing, or if you are, which I am, I love the head and shoulders pattern because it appears often enough. You can work it towards that pattern forming, and if it confirms, well, then you know how to trade that particular pattern. So I'm sure you've got many other strategies and so forth that you can apply something like this to, and give it a little bit of time and a little bit of practice. I'm sure that you'll find that the MT4 drawbar that we've got here is going to be an absolute asset to your trading. So enjoy the draw for FX drawbar.